city slept under a relentless rain, thunder breaking the silence of the night, as if the sky itself was cracking open. At the top of the hill, the WKRZ 808 AM radio station stood like a relic, isolated and forgotten by everyone except Ethan Graves, the man who took over the station's microphones at the darkest hour of the night. The red light in the studio blinked incessantly, almost as if it were a warning sign for something about to happen. Ethan's show, Frequency 66.6, The Voice After Midnight, was already known for its acidic humor and for attracting those who couldn't sleep. With his deep voice and sarcastic tone, he mocked listeners, giving them the chance to speak their craziest thoughts while he made jokes.
Good evening, my fellow insomnia survivors. Welcome to Frequency 66.6. If the devil hasn't picked you up yet, maybe I'll give you a lift in the next hour. Call me, vent, curse, confess. No filters here, just interference.
As the rain outside grew heavier, he settled deeper into his chair, eyeing the studio's controls, already used to the solitude of the night shift. He grabbed the cold coffee, chuckled to himself, and made an inside joke about how bored he was. But then, the phone rang.
Line 1, you're live with Ethan. Haunt me, baby.
Silence came first. Then, a hoarse voice whispered, as if struggling to remain audible through a shaky line. Don't leave at 3:33. Ethan let out a nervous laugh, but the air felt heavier than before. He glanced at the clock. 2:08 a.m.
Okay, darling, 3:33 is when Satan clocks in, right?
But the phone was already silent, and the feeling that something was wrong wouldn't leave him. Something wasn't right. Ethan felt it. The hours passed slowly, but the tension in the air was palpable. The red light in the studio kept blinking, now weaker, as if it were struggling to stay on. Ethan wasn't alone anymore. He could feel it. Something or someone was watching him. The phone rang again. He pressed the button to answer the call.
Hello?
A woman's voice came in, slightly trembling, as if trying to hold back fear.
Is it you? The man from the radio? The one who speaks things before they happen?
Ethan let out a short, uncomfortable laugh, but the feeling that something was off returned in full force.
Depends. If I tell you you're gonna win the lottery and I'm right, you'll share it with me, yeah?
The woman continued.
It's just, I dreamed about you. You were talking on the radio, and then everything started burning. The booth, the wires, the whole room. And you were banging on the door, but no one would open.
Ethan's stomach turned. His hand gripped the mic stand tighter. He tried to keep his sarcastic posture, but his voice cracked slightly.
Right, sister. Thanks for the heads up. I'll keep a fire extinguisher next to the mic, all right? The call dropped. But even with the line dead, he swore he heard her whisper, like an echo trapped in the wires.
It's already begun.
Ethan leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling for a second, trying to rationalize. It had to be a prank, a well-done performance, or built-up paranoia. The phone rang again. This time, the line was flooded with static. Then a voice came through, hoarse, metallic, full of interference.
Road, dark, no end, no name. Are you okay? Where are you right now? I can hear you, but I can't see anything anymore. The road, it just spins.
Ethan turned the return knob to raise the volume. In the background, there was the sound of an engine, wind, and something else. A muffled sob, a moan. He couldn't tell.
What's your name, brother?
I was Ruben. Now I think I'm just Frequency.
The line dropped, and with it, one of the studio light bulbs exploded with a sharp pop. The light flickered. The entire station trembled for a moment. Ethan got up slowly, went to the studio door, locked, tried his phone. No signal. In the corner of the studio, the black screen of the monitor looked different. For a second, his reflection blinked with a delay, and then it smiled. He hadn't. The phone rang again. 3:01 a.m. 3 a.m. The studio's digital clock read 3 a.m., but the seconds didn't seem to move. Ethan stood still, staring at the numbers as if expecting them to explode or simply vanish. He took off his headphones for a moment and realized there was something wrong with the silence. It wasn't just quiet, it was thick, as if the air itself had become heavier, more suffocating. The red on-air light was still on, but it pulsed in a strange rhythm, not intermittent. It was almost like a heartbeat. Ethan stood up slowly. The carpet creaked beneath his feet, as if he were stepping on flesh. He didn't want to leave the room, but he knew he had to. Something was waiting for him, or calling. He tried to open the door. The doorknob was cold, almost frozen, locked. He pulled harder. Nothing. He reached for the spare key in his pocket, the one that was always there, but it was gone. He took a deep breath, walked to the corner of the room where the old archive cabinet stood. Something was drawing him there, a strange feeling in his chest, like a magnet, an ancient calling. The shelves were filled with dusty tapes, many unlabeled, others with future dates. Ethan pulled one out, marked only with 3 numbers, 3.3.3. He placed the tape in the reel-to-reel player. The machine turned on by itself. The lights flickered. The tape began to spin. And then, his own voice echoed through the studio.
You've made it this far again, Ethan, but you already know how it ends. The station doesn't forget. It remembers every cycle.
He stepped back. The voice was his, but it spoke with a sinister calm, as if it were tired of repeating everything over and over.
You always try to change it, always try to run. But you are the frequency now, part of the signal, part of the transmitter.
The tape began spinning faster. The voice grew distorted. The room darkened for a second, as if something were draining the energy from the space. The static rose again, more aggressive. Ethan dropped to his knees, covering his ears, but the voice still pierced his mind. It was as if it were inside him, or as if he were inside the tape. Suddenly, everything stopped. The tape popped off the reel and hit the floor. In the silence that followed, the phone began to ring. One last time, 3:15 a.m. Ethan staggered back into the archive room, still dizzy from the last recording. The tape on the floor seemed to pulse, as if it had a life of its own. He didn't dare touch it again. The shelves were covered in dust, but now he noticed that many of the tapes had handwritten labels with names and future dates. Some were crossed out, others were blank. He pulled one with his own handwriting. The title, Final Broadcast, Ethan Graves. His heart almost stopped. That tape shouldn't exist. He inserted it into the reel-to-reel player, hands trembling. The tape hissed and began. His voice came out low, drawn out, resigned.
If you're hearing this, it means you've reached the end of the cycle. And if you've made it this far, congratulations. You survived long enough to discover you can't escape.
Ethan froze. The voice was older, as if he himself had lived through 100 midnights in that studio, without ever leaving. The recording continued.
You're no longer a broadcaster, no longer a man. You are the antenna. You are the echo. Every time the transmission restarts, you are reborn in the signal. And each listener is a reflection of what you once were.
The tape sped up on its own. The voice became distorted. Then came other voices. Dozens. All of them his. Laughing, crying, screaming. Ethan fell back, tripping over a pile of tapes. One burst open on the floor and unraveled like a snake across the tiles, forming 3 words in magnetic tape. Stay on air. He ran to the hallway. The station looked different now. The walls throbbed slightly, as if breathing. The lights flickered in red and white tones, like an anxious heartbeat. He reached the reception area. The glass on the door was cracked, but it reflected a version of him that wasn't quite right. It was him, but dressed in old clothes, like from the 1970s. On the badge, Ethan G., Night Broadcaster, 1973. He stepped back, heart racing. He returned to the studio instinctively, as if an invisible magnet was pulling him back to the core of the broadcast. On the control panel display, a message blinked. On AIR 3:32 a.m., 1 minute left, and then the phone rang. One last time. 3H33. The phone rang, but it wasn't a normal ring. It was deep, muffled almost like a funeral bell. Ethan stared at the phone. He knew he had to answer, not because he wanted to, but because there was no other choice. As if he were following a script he already knew. He picked up the receiver slowly, the chill of the plastic crawling up his arm to his chest.
Hello?
The line was silent for 2 seconds, then a familiar breath, and then his own voice.
You made it here again, Ethan. You almost made it this time. Who are you? I'm what's left of you. Every time you fail.
The silence grew heavy between them. Ethan closed his eyes, trying to control his breathing. He felt like his body no longer belonged to him, nor his voice, nor his thoughts.
Why do I keep coming back? Because you still think you can shut it down, but you can't. Not anymore.
The red button on the panel, the one that ended the broadcast, began blinking on its own. It never blinked. Never.
What if I cut the signal? The cycle breaks, but everything vanishes. The station, you, every memory. It all becomes static.
And if I stay on air?
You go on, aware. And maybe you get to warn the next one, maybe.
Ethan looked at the button. His hand shook. He took a deep breath and removed his hand from the button. He grabbed the mic calmly, spoke with a firm voice, as if finally accepting who he was now.
Good evening, listeners. If this is my last broadcast, why, I hope no one is listening. Because if you are, it might already be too late for you too.
The red studio light burst into brightness. The sound of static took over, but beneath it, there was something else. Clapping. Slow, rhythmic, from something not human. And then, silence. No one knows what happened to Ethan Graves. The station kept broadcasting, but always the same show. Always the same recording. At 3:33 a.m. every night. The same voice, the same laugh, the same warning.
Stay on air.